Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Improve Your Data Processing with a Single Workflow Solution. Before we get started, just a couple of very quick housekeeping items for you. First off, this webinar is being recorded, so in the event that you have to drop off for some reason or you'd like someone else to hear what you heard today, the recording will be available this afternoon in the webinars section of the SatoriSoftware.com website. Next, and this one's very important, we have enjoyed playing Stump Lyle during these webinars, and on the right-hand side of your screen you will see a question box. We'd love to get your questions. This webinar is about your questions, so if you've got them, type them into that box, and rather than batch them up to the end, as you may have heard us do previously, we're going to go ahead and play Stump Lyle today, so I will be interrupting him along the way, so you can get questions answered in as close to real time as I can manage here, and if for some reason your question doesn't get answered, or for some reason we don't sneak it in a timely fashion, I do apologize in advance. That would be my fault, not Lyle's. We will follow up after the fact. So questions are important. Please feel free to enter them in along the way, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Finally, this webinar is scheduled to last around 60 minutes or so, and that depends entirely upon the questions. I think that Lyle has about 30 minutes worth of content or thereabouts, so we are really anticipating digging into the specifics with you, things that you want to hear about. So moving on. I am Rob Perrin, the Director of Multimedia Marketing for Satori Software, and I'll be your host today. Joining me is Lyle Myers, the Senior Data Quality Solutions Consultant. Hello, Lyle.
Hi, Rob. How are you today?
I am very well, thank you. Now, did you get your window closed?
I did. We should not hear the geese flying over into the wetlands behind me.
Broadcasting with Lyle is always a surprise. Sometimes he's in the backseat of a car doing it via cell phone. Other times the dogs are barking, geese, or it's always entertaining with Lyle. Always a good show.
Thanks, Rob.
Absolutely. Good to have you aboard again. All right, so we're going to address some things today that have been common themes that we've seen on customer visits. Lyle and I have both been out at a number of customer sites and seen some reoccurring themes, and so the goal is to solve these problems that we've seen. One of them is the race for space, and if you've ever gone to your IT department, or perhaps you're in the IT department and you have folks coming to you asking for more space, you know that a lot of times the processes that people have put together create a lot of temporary files, and oftentimes those temporary files persist and they begin to accumulate, and next thing you know, you're going back to the well requesting additional storage space. We're going to address that during this webinar today. Scripts and processes throughout the production environment. Now, I like to use the term Frankenstein, although Lyle periodically takes exception to that. The idea that perhaps along the way you've downloaded a number of applications that you're not sure where they came from or what the licensing is about them, and you've got them strung together with VB script or batch scripts, and this is basically how your process operates. So we're going to talk about streamlining that and sort of cleaning that Frankenstein environment out of your production and really making that flow more smoothly, and Lyle's got some great stuff to talk about there. Version control, of course. One guy comes in, makes a change, the next shift comes in, and you're not sure what's changed at that point, and Lyle gets to address that too. The beauty to this particular solution, Lyle gets to say yes a lot. So when I say questions and answers here, Lyle's answer is almost always yes. So please make this a Stump Lyle session as we go. Matching, Lyle's going to go into some great detail about just how complicated matching is, and well, was not anymore with this solution. Isn't that right, Lyle?
That is correct.
Fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the demonstration here. And if you see something you like and you want to know more about it, like I say, enter it into the question box. Otherwise, if you have a question that you want Lyle to answer, go ahead and toss it up there, and I will interrupt him along the way. So we're going to go ahead and get started and hand this over to Lyle for his presentation.
Well, I'm hoping everybody sees my screen at this point.
Looks good.
I think I clicked on the right button. So we wanted to kick this thing off as we wanted to talk about, as Rob coined that phrase of the race for space. One of the things that I experienced in my production days and that I'm continuing to see today from the challenges in a production facility with data is that there's always that challenge of space. It seems like you're always fighting for more and more space. And as business grows, as the requirements to archive and purge grow for retention, that always turns into a challenge for having enough space for that. And today, I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about is what you're experiencing today and what you can do and have with the Redpoint solution to help save some of that space. And one of the things that you're probably experiencing today is this. This is a particular customer, particular job that I have out here. One of the things that you'll see is, if we look at this, that is 350,000 records, and it occupies just short of 2 gigs of space. So the thing that ends up happening in here is that I have my job files, the parameter files that you're using to run, but this is where the space comes in. Each one of these become working files in your current environment, where you're basically going through and saying, I got to hand it off from application to application to application to application, and between each one of the applications I create a working file, so I never have to go back to the beginning and run each one of those applications. So you've learned how to stack up a series of applications to get to an end game with the input files that you have received from your clients. And these working files, again, are used for efficiency, so you don't have to go back to the beginning, but they are occupying storage space. And so that's an ongoing issue, that is that race for space. And a lot of times is that you can zip these up when you've moved the job off to production, but one of the challenges that's continuing and ongoing is you still have to have that space available to you when you're processing. This is one job, and if you're doing 20 jobs a day, this can pile up in a hurry. 350,000 might be middle of the road, could be large for some, small for others. So you get a general idea of what the space occupies. In addition to that, one of the things that you'll see is that I have all my input files, and I have these ancillary files that all have to go with them. All of these additional files, the def files, the FMT files. Again, more files to manage, where the role of processing the data should be just that. I want to process data. I don't want to manage files and file systems and so forth. And so in this scenario here, you'll see that I'm not only managing the customer supplied files, TXTs, XLs, delimited files, DBF files, and so forth, but now I'm actually having to manage additional files. And it's the same thing that when you're getting into your parameter files or your job files that run between applications, you have to have some instruction set between each one of the applications. And the challenge that I see that's ongoing is that as I'm building out these things, I have to manage these versions. Customer sends in instructions, I put together the initial job file, and now all of a sudden there's a change order that comes in that forces me to manage yet another iteration. Or as I'm developing it, I might have multiple iterations, or I might have templates. And all of this is occupying disk space. These tend to be flat files, so there's lots of space in them. If you zip them, they get pretty small. But once again, you're occupying a lot of space. You're managing files for data processing rather than doing your data processing. Where that leads us around is that takes us into also the ability to go through, and as Rob termed the term was Frankenstein, is that you're now scripting things. You may be running scripts to put all of those applications together to do your data management and so forth.
My favorite installation that I saw, they actually had a number of different applications that they had downloaded, and then it kicked off with a batch file. There was a timed batch file that kicked off the first application, which then triggered a VB script that ran a number of other applications, and then at the end they had another batch file that kicked off that did cleanup and zipping and things like that. And I asked, when something goes wrong, how do you debug it? And they said, well, we're hoping that doesn't happen because the guy who put all of this together left the company a year ago, and no one is sure how it works.
And that's a common theme that I've heard as well. Is that things have gotten built, and over time, there's a change in staff or retirement or whatever the case may be, and they run very well, but when things go wrong, it's tough to back into it. And that holds true even if you don't have turnover on the staff, is that if you've got something that runs and it runs very well, it's difficult to go back and follow those breadcrumbs into that trail to understand where something did go amiss. There's enough logs out there, but it's still going through and processing those logs as part of that audit. Gets back to what I've said, I'm managing files instead of managing data. One of the other things that we'll talk about here is that I want to touch a little bit on all of this version control. And the version control comes out of the area of inside of the Redpoint solution. You'll see that version control is basically set up so that I can have multiple versions, and I can always revert to an earlier version if I so choose without managing it as a file. All of this information is stored inside of Redpoint rather than it being out on the disk. I'm managing it inside of Redpoint. And what you'll see here is that I have the ability to have users. There's a security model inside of Redpoint, and one of the things that allows me to do is set up users, administrators, developers, operators, along those lines. And what's nice about it is, in this case, I happen to be the user that you'll see on the screen here, but as I'm going through and making changes to this, I'm altering that process. I can go back to an older one here, and you'll see that I can open this older one, and it's going to look significantly different than what we saw just in the last one that we're looking at, where there's no annotations in it, there's pieces missing. And again, as I'm going through and developing this process for a new client, whatever the case may be, I have the ability to go back to these versions. This is the one I so choose. I can then save that, goes to the top of the repository, and I can always come back to this previous version because it does not disappear. Let Redpoint manage the versions and let those breadcrumbs stay in place with the fact that Rob Perrin built it or Lyle Myers built it, and we can see who touched it last, who checked it back in, and why it's running.
And you make a fascinating point there, Lyle. When you first trained me on this application, I was up and running in it was less than an hour total, and I know that that's not typical, but you actually had me doing simple processes and understanding what you had built in a very short period of time. It was certainly nothing like trying to pick through a fruit salad of small applications that were put together, and many of which you don't have the source code for and can't tell exactly what they're doing or how you would fix them. But you had me up and running and understanding your flows in less than an hour.
Yeah, and you talked about the Frankenstein before, and I mean that was one of the comments that you've made along the way is that I'm working in a single environment here rather than having to work across multiple applications to accomplish tasks for managing the data based on whatever those customer requirements are. And I know that you've made that comment in the past where it's nice to have one cohesive environment to develop in and be able to manage my data. So as I said, the other thing that comes in with version control that we saw in here is that you can also leave these breadcrumbs in here. Is that when I save it, I come in and I leave myself a note, revert to the previous version. Or in this case, if I hover over it, it's added window dressing, column profiling. So I'm leaving myself some notes or leaving the next person notes especially if I need to go on vacation and Rob's got to pick it up. He understands what some of those notes are. And that's, again, all saved inside of Redpoint, not necessarily having to be managed as files on the disk. It's all visible here to the users.
And what's
in addition to that,
what's just as likely in that case is that as a mailer, my business is thriving. I'm one of the ones that survived here, and so now I'm having to do a couple of shifts. And so working around the clock, we've got two different guys who are going to be working in this flow, and we need them to be able to see what the guy on the earlier shift did, what sort of changes happened, their guy or gal, and we need to see what sort of changes happened. And so this is your opportunity to tell me, fixed this flow or modified this flow for this job or whatever else you had to do. But it's all right there. There's no guessing, and you're certainly not leaving sticky notes on a monitor for me.
Yeah, and I mean, to the point of being, there's several different environments that we see. We see extended hours where you have a shift that comes in the morning, and then you have a small group that comes in later in the day, and there's an overlap. We see multiple shifts. We see on-calls and so forth. Well, invariably, when you are working outside of the normal business hours of being able to contact the client, if something goes wrong, another person picks it up. Rob picks it up from Lyle that did it at 11 o'clock this morning, and now he's got to find his way around. He can come into Redpoint, see the version control, see the notes, and see, oh, well, Lyle made this change, and now I can troubleshoot this more easily to find out where that problem went.
It's probably good because I can't read your handwriting anyway.
No, it's terrible. So the other thing that you'll see on in the screen here is also the ability to annotate. And here what I've done, more breadcrumbs, I've been able to annotate this. And again, not managing anything on the disk. With this annotation, I'm leaving notes for another person or even myself to pick that up. My memory is not what it used to be. I forget things, and if I don't touch it for a week or 2 weeks, or maybe it's once a month that I do it, I can leave myself or another person notes on what I've done in there. Again, here's the note for what's going on in this process. Here's a state count note. Those are the type of things that the Redpoint environment brings for efficiency in being able to share or collaborate on things when it has to be passed off from one person to the next. In addition to that, one of the things that we have talked about for the Race for Space is that because I'm working in a single environment, I don't have multiple applications that I'm trying to pass data from one to the next to the next to the next. What we're typically hearing from clients in the industry has been the fact that they have these multitude of applications, and what they're finding is they're being able to consolidate what those applications do or perform into the Redpoint environment. More and more are finding uses for, gee, I've written a VV program out here to be able to accomplish something, and I don't have to do that anymore. I figured out a way to actually accomplish it in here with my data in stream, so I don't have to create working files. And those working files become, they become very large very quickly. When I'm building this from beginning to end, what you'll see here is that I have multiple files in, and at no point have I actually written an output file. My output file will be at the very end, where I have the ability to come into here and say, now I'm actually ready to write a CSV output file, and I can come into here and do that. That's the first time that any of this has been written out to disk.
You say CSV, but does that have to be a CSV? Can I have a PDF?
You can have if you want to do a report, it can be a PDF. If I want to have fixed length files, it can be fixed length files. I can read and write to Excel spreadsheets. I can read and write to databases. I can read and write DBase. And again, the DBase isn't the limit of DBase 3. It's 4, 5, 6. It supports all of those variations of DBase as well. And once again, all I'm doing is writing. I'll be writing out to the file that is the closest it could possibly be, so I can hand it off to production. It's going out to an inkjet machine, or it's going off to variable data print, and that file is going to be passed along for going out to the print floor. That's where I haven't created any intermediate files. Typically, the question that comes up is, but the intermediate files are great to be able to examine what I want to verify or validate as I'm going along. I write an output file, I look at it, gee, did I get the expected results? Great for temporary files. What Redpoint offers is the ability to have these data viewers. And one of the things that you'll see in the data viewers is that I've built the data viewers all along through here, and I've named them, numbered them, so that I understand what order they're in. And I can actually do auditing or validation, QC checking, as I'm going along and developing without actually writing a file to disk. Not managing the file, I want to manage the data. So that becomes a useful part of it is that at no point in time have I actually created an output file until I get to the very end. So my processing is going through name parsing, standardization, alterations to my data, changes to my data. I'm also going through a cast process in here. Everything's running in stream. From the cast process, it's going directly to match. And from match, it's basically going into pre-sort, and I'm doing some post-pre-sort work here where I'm doing some sample selects. I need to generate sign-offs. So there's the benefit of where you have input files all the way through to output files. I don't have ancillary files. In other words, this file here, this fixed length fielded file, doesn't have a def file, doesn't have an FMT file. It's the same thing with Excel spreadsheets. I don't have to convert them to CSVs. I can actually call that Excel spreadsheet up directly. If there's multiple workbooks or worksheets in the Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to use multiple of these and be able to read from it directly without having to open the spreadsheet, export it to CSV, then read the CSV into my current application. I can read directly from those different tabs in an Excel spreadsheet. Once again, saving that space of converting an Excel spreadsheet to a CSV, more file management, more touches to the data where I can actually read directly from the data. In addition to having that cohesive workflow, we also want to have the ability to do some reporting in here. And that's where you'll see something like a state count. In this case, I'm returning it to the screen. But there's no reason why I couldn't have like a tabular type report or a column report where I would just have rows and columns, and it would give me a real flat looking report. Redpoint also offers up the ability to do what is called an active report, but I can generate that report out as PDF. And generating that report out as a PDF, an example here is the one that's coming out of Match. One of the things you'll see is I can generate that PDF. Well, coming out of that PDF, I also have the ability to go through and open up a report designer, and I can create the report. This one's fairly simplistic, but I put a logo in it, I drop my data into it, and I will actually be able to generate a report that has a custom touch to it that looks like it came directly from my company. In addition to that, the reporting tool that's in here, it's a Crystal Report Lite version is what it is, but I can do graphs, pie graphs, bar graphs. I can also do graphs in here as well if that brings value to what you're trying to do. I don't consider Redpoint to be a reporting tool, but I do consider Redpoint to be able to generate those reports from the data processing that you may be looking for your clients. So the other thing that we have in here, not only the annotations and the ability to report, once again, that cohesive environment is taking me all the way through. I have the ability to go through and filter that data so I can send it down multiple streams. And a good example here is that I want to be able to go into my cast tool with only records that are U.S. records. I can In here, I'm basically going through and identifying those, label the valid states so that I can filter those off. And do I need to filter the foreigns off to a separate file? I'm returning mine to the screen as part of my QC, but I can write them out to a file if that's the requirement that you have to return those to the client. Again, a cohesive workflow that takes me from start to end without actually having to do exit routines and assemble additional programs to be able to do that processing. What I see a lot in the industry is a lot of people that are still using Microsoft Access or FoxPro or Paradox that are out there using one of those tools to be able to do some of that data manipulation. What we're hearing from the clients that have adopted Redpoint is they're having less reliance on the FoxPro, and some have actually retired that process of going into a FoxPro or an Access or a Paradox and being able to actually do that processing in here rather than it being an external tool that they're, again, bouncing in and out of. And all of that movement of bouncing in and out of those applications is that the cost per space is what it is. So the other thing that I also wanted to touch on a little bit here was we talked a little bit at the beginning as far as matching. One of the challenges that has existed in the industry with the tools that have been available with matching is that a lot of times I'll receive multiple files from a customer, and some of those files, or most of those files, let me put it to you that way, want to go through and they want to be able to do a family match, last name and address. Okay, great, but two of the files that I received all will be suppression files, and they should be suppressing only at the address level. I'm not going to look at any part of the name. I just want to suppress the addresses at the end. In the current tool sets that are available out there, you have to run a match for the family match, generate an output file, and then I have to run a match for the suppression against the residents, and do that in 2 steps, generate again more data for the disk drive. Here you have the ability to go through that process, and I can introduce new files along the way. You'll see that most of my files come at the beginning, but this pander list is coming at the end, and I can basically stitch together multiple matches in here to go through that process to say, I want to add another match. This one happens to be an individual match, but I want to add a new file, and I want to take the results of the individual match, and I want to suppress those records that match a suppression file on address only. All stays in stream, no temporary working files, one cohesive workflow.
Hey, Lyle.
So, yeah.
We knew this was going to happen because you had to go and call out the Fox Pro users. So we have a question from a Fox Pro user.
Oh. Okay.
There's curiosity about performance and how do processing times with Redpoint relate to the processing times of, well, let's just use Fox Pro as an example. What are we looking at? Improvement, or is this going to slow me down?
This is going to improve it. What we're hearing from, not my words, but what we're hearing from clients is that they've talked about using Fox Pro and retiring Fox Pro and finding the performance of Redpoint is actually measurably better than what they're getting today. So those have been very encouraging words that we're hearing for those Satori Redpoint clients that are actually retiring their use of Fox Pro.
And can you imagine how hard it is to find somebody who is an expert in Fox Pro in this day and age?
Yeah, exactly. Now, what you will see is that functionality that customers have grown accustomed to in Fox Pro, that expressions or functions that are available, all and more are available inside of Redpoint. So Redpoint has north of about 350 different functions or expressions that are available that you can deploy inside of here. And that's where the messaging that we're hearing from clients is that I've been able to move that processing from Fox Pro over here and keeping it in line in the cohesive environment.
Improvement in performance and improvement in capabilities.
Yeah, and we also talk about the performance of replacing the Fox Pro, but we're also hearing from clients that have deployed the Satori Redpoint solution on the matching aspect of it, and the messaging's been very consistent, is the matching runs faster, noticeably faster than what they have today.
So I have a comment here from a current Redpoint Satori customer who says that they are 4 to 6 weeks in on the install and Fox Pro is almost gone.
I needn't say more.
Yes, that pretty well covers
it's good. That's pretty well covers it. That's the type of accolades that we're hearing from those that have actually adopted Satori Redpoint, is that they're finding ways to retire that Frankenstein mess of applications.
So I have to ask, Lyle, the flow that you've got there on your screen, that looks really complicated. It looks really complicated, and we're talking about simplifying flows here. So can you maybe scroll back up to the top again and just do a quick general, give me a gist of what I'm looking at here. What you've got lines back and forth. This isn't nearly as complicated as it looks. It's just a pictorial of a complicated process, right?
That's correct. And what this process represents is I have 5 input files, 2 rentals, a deceased list, a master file, and a do not mail or a pander list. That's my input. And that's what you see represented in this gray box up here and this vertical line box down here. There's my 5 files, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's what's coming into the input process. Through here, what I'm doing is very similar to what we're seeing a lot of clients being able to do, is they want to be able to do name parsing, capitalization, gender assignment. Here is the tool that is used for doing, in this example here, I'm building a full name field, but I have some intelligence behind it because I don't want the extra space in it. And I'm using an expression or a function that you would typically use in something like a Fox Pro. And that's what this particular tool, Calculate it's called, that you have the ability to do. And you'll see that a lot of these functions are available there. There's padding, there's rights, there's lefts, there's substrings, and I can go on and on and on about the number of functions. As I said, there's north of 350. In addition to that, as I'm coming down through here, one of the things that you'll see is that I've actually done a little profiling in here. One of the tools is called a profiler. And that profiler is right here, where what the discovery was, it was this term right here in the name field. Where I had unknown. So I've basically done a little validation on my data at this point, and what that validation has allowed me to do is determine that I have 36 records out here that have the word unknown in the name field. Is that what a customer would expect? No. And the instructions comes back and tells me, well, gee, what we want to be able to do is I want to be able to replace the value of unknown with the value of current resident.
Are you trying to tell that a mailing that says, "Dear unknown, your business is important to us," is not impactful? Is that what you're saying?
Indeed. And so here's the ability to do a little data validation on that data before I get too far downstream and find out that I end up with a correspondence going out that says, "Dear unknown, your business is important to us." In addition to that, I've also gone through and I've identified where I wanted to identify my foreigns and my domestics, because my domestics I want to basically go through my CAS tool. My foreigns I could send it through additional processing or handwork, so I could write it out to a file. It could be handled separately from domestic mailing. And I can basically go through there. I search and replace table, identify those records, now filter off the records. My filter says if the country equals US, then it will go into the CAS tool. If it doesn't, mine goes to the screen, but I go to an output file. So from the top to the CAS, I've covered a lot of things. I've corrected the data, I've filtered the data, I've identified some foreigns in the data, I've built instructions in there for creating a full name field because I'm going to use that as part of my messaging that's going to be in the personalized letter, or it's got to go out to the inkjets for building out that name line and so forth. A lot of that work's being done in these tools. The tool set that you may be using today revolves around the fact that I have lots of different blocks of parameters that I've set, execution blocks that I've set, that I've gone through. Well, you can almost look at the tools as kind of like an execution block from the standpoint is that it's just an instruction set. What do I need to do to the data next? What do I need to do to the data next? And that's what's going down through the system, is each tool represents a touch point in the data that I'm altering it, filtering it, or altering it. In addition to that, one of the things that we talk about what Satori Redpoint can deliver is when we talk about, we get into the matching aspect of it. We talked a little bit about being able to be able to put multiple matches into a continuous workflow here without having to disrupt the fact that I have to go out, run it, create the temporary files. But also one of the things that Satori Redpoint has is the pander list. What I've done with the pander list here is that this pander list happened to be 5 million records. But the thing that ends up happening is that the only records that I want to match are the ones that are part of the other supplied files, my rental list, my master list. There's no need for me to bring in Hawaii records when my mailing's going into the Midwest of, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and so forth. I don't need to have, I don't even need to consider or read the do not mail or the pander list for those Hawaii records. So what Satori Redpoint allows for us to do is that more complex thing is I build an index file and I only read the records that I need to read. In this case, these 22,000 records are only bringing back 178,000 records because the 178,000 records is all that are potential matches to my 22,000. Significantly reduce the processing time and the reach into that pander file that's not necessary. You don't need to read 5 million records. I'm only going to read 178,000. So there's, again, some gained efficiencies in being able to index that file and be able to read it in, all in a cohesive workflow that you see here. So repeatable type files like a do not mail list, like a deceased list, those can all be indexed for efficiency of matching and performance. And again, I hope that answers the question that you saw, Rob, was the fact that we have that cohesive workflow. Each tool represents something that I'm doing. This one represents a full end-to-end process.
Absolutely.
Files in, all the way through pre-sort.
And this doesn't look like, this isn't a particularly complicated flow. This is something you would typically see going out onto a pre-production environment. This looks like something I've seen in a customer's environment.
Right. I mean, the fact that they're doing data manipulation, they're doing CAS, they're doing some type of matching. This one's a fairly simple matching. It's an individual match. Mm-hmm. And I'm being able to do pre-sort and being able to also process, do some post-processing pre-sort, like I need to generate my sample selects here. Those are the type of things that, again, create that end-to-end process where I haven't actually had to exit out.
So I do want to make sure we get our questions in here, and another one just came in. Any plans to create MS SSIS components?
We haven't had that requirement asked of us. So that's not a no, I'd like to learn more.
Okay, so it's not a stump, Lyle, this time around, but this is something we'd like to follow up on. I've got...
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. How about Inkjet files? Can you create them?
If I'm creating a CSV file to go out to the inkjet, yes. If I need to create a VIP3 file that needs to go out to the inkjet, I would need Label Studio. Can I call Label Studio inside of here? Yes, I can.
Okay. All right, what's next, Lyle?
So I've covered what I wanted to cover from end to end. That race for the space, the complex matching into a cohesive workflow. We wanted to also touch a little bit about, we talked about the batch script. That's the tie-off to the whole thing. One of the things that you'll see here is whoops, not that one, Lyle, this one, is I have the ability to create that script that you're running. So if you've used the script to stitch together all the applications, Redpoint also has the ability to stitch together different applications if you so choose. The nice part about the automation or the scripting part of it, it's called automation on the Redpoint side, is that not only can I do exit routines to external programs. In this case, the simple one was I wanted to call presort. Rather than calling presort inside of a workflow, I wanted to call presort separately. I could call Label Studio in here as well. This can be trigger-based. Trigger-based meaning I can set it up to run at a scheduled time at some point during the day. I can say that I can run this on a delay. I want to set this up and I want to run it in 2 hours instead of running it right now. I can also set up a hot folder that where I'm receiving a file from a client, that it will process that file based on that workflow that I've built, and has the ability to go through that process of, again, automating that process. One of the things that you have with a workflow is you can, or with an automation, is you can turn it into a live state. In other words, it runs continuously until you actually physically stop it or the server crashes. But it's the type of thing that will run continuously. So where you're trying to reduce the touch points, I built this great workflow that I have, and that great workflow is allowing me to basically receive the files and click the go button. But the next time it comes in, if it is relatively similar, but I have a few variables that need to change, one of the nice parts about this is that you'll see in here, I can actually create variables and pass those changing parameters into that workflow that we just looked at. And that allows for the automation or semi-automation of processing with fewer human touch points to it for efficiency. I mean, there's still the business out there that what I guess I would call handcrafted, that sets one mailer apart from the next, and that is the fact that the handcrafting is an important part of your business. But the thing that ends up happening is that you like to have a repetitive business. That's ongoing income, and you're trying to basically take the handcrafting out of it and get it into an automated or semi-automated state. That's what the automation does, is it allows for you to create those things that can be running on a scheduled basis, or they can be running on a hot folder basis, and be able to go through and run those.
So my life is going to be easier, and I'm not going to have to give up anything for it.
Right. I mean, the thing is that when you start to look at the handcrafted jobs or the unique jobs they're typically a higher value job for you. And yes, they're more complex and they're more problematic and there are more challenges to it, but hopefully they've been sold at a higher value price point that makes it all worthwhile. Here is to take that business of the more repeatable stuff and create that automation. Inside of an automation, I also have the ability to be notified on successes or failures. You'll see that I have red lights and green lights, and I can attach to each one of these red lights or these green lights a system that will, in this case, I'm writing to the log, but there's nothing to stop me from writing to an email. And now it will actually generate an email, and I can actually have a messaging in here with some system variables that will extract information from logs that will give me more information other than, oops, there's a problem, or thanks, that's great, it ran. I can get time updates, system stamps to it. I can get log information. I can get information that when I do get an email on a failure, for instance, that there's more information in it that I know where to go look other than, oh, something broke and now I got to go swim in the sea of red point and figure out where I'm at. I can pass that information out in the state of an email. So that's the upside to the automation is that I can be notified as it's going along of success or failure. And that's really what you're interested in. If I'm going to tuck it into the back room and run it lights out, I want to know if it ran successfully, or to the contrary, there was a problem and something broke. So that's the beauty of the automation. We've also, Satori's also looked at the possibility of automating things even further. And an example that I'll talk about here is that having the ability to go through and convert files into a house format automatically. Yes, that is something that can actually be done inside of Redpoint. I don't need to have anything. If I have a DBF file or a fixed link file or a delimited file, for instance, one of the things that you have the ability to do is drop into a hot folder, and they can be converted into a house format. If there's a problem with a file because there's some parameters that are written around it, you can be notified, and those files can be then rejected and dropped into a review folder if you wanted to. So that extension of automation goes much deeper than the simplicity part that I've talked about here.
Lyle, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we're going to have to move on, but I do have one last question for you here that came in, and it's about pre-sort integration. The question is, how are pre-sort instructions being built?
So the challenge that we ran into, as many of you already know, is that pre-sort is a complex machine. And what we've examined was, how do we bring that all back? It's been very fluid with the postal changes that are taking place. And so one of the things that we've done is that pre-sort or pre-sort views still remains in place. What Redpoint does is that in the tool here is it will call a valid job file. So what you eliminate here is that if the job file is valid, you eliminate the ability to have a def file, because this is a def file override. And you can see that what I get into is that this can get somewhat complex here on what I want to be able to do for the PW fields that I'm mapping in. So Satori pre-sort inside of Redpoint still requires Satori pre-sort product, whether it's a views or whether you're running job files, to have a valid template that you're calling, but I can pass some of that information in by mapping in that information as overrides. And a good example is my piece attributes. Gee, that's what changes. That's what I have to change in my PST. Here you have the ability to have those overrides that would go into here.
All right, Lyle, I'd like to summarize very quickly some of the things that we've covered here. Let's take a look and get my presentation up and running again. Eliminating data processing challenges, the workflow advantage. Of course, Redpoint, the product that we've been talking about. You get to move from input to output with a single solution. And Lyle, you've mentioned a number of different times the idea is that you've not got a hodgepodge, a Frankenstein of multiple different tools that do whatever and can break down. You've got one tool and you can follow your data right through without having to write temporary files out and go back and ask for terabytes more of storage space for temporary files. You've got a complete data management process. I was able to follow your data from the input files that you had there right down to the point where you output in a variety of different formats the data, and pretty much ready for production floor at that point. So easy to follow, lots of statusing along the way, one complete data management process right there in Redpoint. And of course, automation efficiencies, it sounds like We have, in fact, Lyle, I like to joke that when you and I get to talk about Redpoint, you have the easiest job in the world because it seems like you sit on the other end of this and you just say yes to all of the questions I get brought in.
Sometimes it seems like that, Rob.
I enjoy that. It's fun, and one of these days I'm actually going to come up with a question. In fact, maybe I do have a question for you, Lyle, that you can say no to, not to put words in your mouth, but do you ever get tired of saying yes?
I do.
Oh.
I'm looking for that first no. Please challenge me.
So automation efficiencies, I think that's one of the cool parts, is that a lot of people have these processes that go right through, and it's straightforward, and they got it figured out, and, you know, I don't want to lose that. I don't want a more manual process, and obviously in this case, that's not what is going to happen. So next steps. What happens? This is interesting. I like Redpoint. I want to follow up on it. And, of course, you can give us a call here at Satori Software or email us, and we've got folks who are going to walk you through it. In fact, it might even be Lyle who ends up with your on-site consultation. You know, he makes himself right at home there in your office. And, in fact, next thing we know, he'll be broadcasting from your place. But we've got folks that can help you out. Lyle will talk to you, or someone will talk to you about migration options. We're interested in hearing what sort of flows you got going right now and what you're concerned about. We get that this is a production operation, and you're going to need to change the wheels on the bus while you're driving it down the road. And we completely get that. In fact, Lyle, I don't think we've yet run into a customer yet where they weren't actively in production, and so we're getting really good at getting this up and running and then kind of bringing it in. Have you run into anyone yet where it was, we got all the time in the world?
Everybody seems to be building the plane while it's flying.
Yeah, that's pretty typical for the industry, and certainly for this. We get it. These are long-standing production processes we're talking about replacing here, so we understand completely. But we do want to help you eliminate those obstacles and improve your data management process. So if you want to get started, contact us. The phone number there is there on your screen. Of course, if you're here at this webinar, you probably already know how to reach us here at Satori Software. So on behalf of everyone at Satori Software, I would like to thank Lyle Myers. As usual, Lyle, a wonderful job of demonstrating the product. And I'm glad once again I got the opportunity to hear you say yes to pretty much every question that came in. I do want to thank everyone who attended today, and thank you for joining us. At the close of this webinar, you will be presented with a brief survey. If you'd fill that out, that's our best bet for improving the webinar series. Make sure we're answering the questions and that you are asking and presenting things in a format that you'd like to get. So Lyle, once again, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have you dial into my studio.
You're very welcome.
For Satori Software, I'm Rob Perrin. I'm the Director of Multimedia Marketing, and I've been your host today. Once again, thank you for attending this webinar. We at Satori would like to wish you smooth mailing ahead.